19 hours 31 in Guyana. You're listening to KAIETEUR Radio. It is time to enter room 592 this evening. At the helm of the program, Dr. Yog Mahadeo, alongside his co-host, senior journalist of KAIETEUR News, Leonard Gildarie. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening. Good evening to you, Mr. Kevin Smith. Good evening to Joshua. What's Joshua's last name? Is it Van Sletman?
Van Sletman.
Van Sletman. Good evening to you, Joshua. Good evening to all of the team at KAIETEUR Radio there, the people working hard behind the scenes. And of course, good evening to my co-host, Mr. Leonard Gildarie, as we await a couple of seconds to welcome Mr. Ruel Johnson to the hot seat within the studios of KAIETEUR Radio there. And ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you all to this room 592, where we unleash the truth. The topic continues to be elections 2020. Today, Mr. Leonard Gildarie and yours truly, we had elections watch at 1:30. And Leonard, it was a wonderful show and it was a good discussion with Mr. Leno Craig. What's your thoughts, sir?
Well, I had a call not too long ago, and I could probably divulge this. He is raring to come back. He says he is armed now with some other information that he did not have in his possession a little earlier. So I said, okay, we're going to get ready. Now, we know that we're in crunch time here. Lots of stuff is going to be happening over the weekend here. It's very serious times. Much is at stake for the different stakeholders. And so we will be bringing you throughout the weekend leading up to when the recount is finished, completed. We will be bringing you up all the developments as it happens, all the lives and everything here on KAIETEUR Radio. So, Yog, that was not my fault. That was Kevin's fault.
Well, that's good. And viewers and listeners all across Guyana, the Caribbean, and wherever you're joining us from, indeed, tonight and every night, except for weekends, of course, we are going to look at elections 2020. And tonight, later on in the program, we will be joined by Mr. Vincent Alexander, who will give us an elections update. As you know, we have been dependent on Mr. Alexander, who has been kind enough to agree to come on, notwithstanding his extremely busy schedule. Mr. Says Gunraj, we are hoping he would join us at some time too to give us an update. Whenever they can, we try to balance it and bring everybody in. However, ladies and gentlemen, D-Day is quickly approaching. And invariably, one way or another, this time next week, we are going to see the shape of what this country will be in. And trust me when I say, the shape of what this country's future will be is dependent on you and I. It's dependent on APNU, AFC, PPPC, ANUG, every C that you could think of and every G you could think of. Everyone. Because when the declaration is made, all eyes will be looking at how the politicians of this country are reacting to those declarations. It is an extremely sensitive time in this nation. A lot of persons are very concerned, Leonard, and have expressed concerns that the next couple of days might be problematic. I want to be the eternal optimist and say we are going to continue to have verbal problems. We are going to continue to have a war of words, but let it remain as that. Let it remain a war of words. Well, let us keep our peace. Let us keep our calm. Yes, Leonard?
Yes. Well, already we've seen a lot of pressure being mounted on the stakeholders. A few hours back, there was a statement letter that came out from 5 members of the U.S. Congress to President Granger, asking him to ensure that he pays attention, recognize the recount and the results of the recount. Significantly in that letter also, they said that his place in the history books is at stake as well. So very important. I think earlier today too, the private sector is also echoing the same thing. So,
correct. And Mr. Granger's place in the history book is already well written. It's up to him to continue to have it continue written in a proper fashion. He's a historian himself. And I must say, as I turn in a minute to Mr. Ruel Johnson, I must say to you viewers and listeners, Those people, if you find anyone on social media that is spreading racial or any discord, report them. Don't share their rottenness. Ignore it, turn away, report them to Facebook, and leave them to their own miseries. Don't make them look good by sharing it. Also, I want to say to those naysayers, those people who are saying, well, what about these 5 congressmen? Why can't they look after their own problems in the USA? Let us leave the USA to look after their own problems. But brothers and sisters, to those of you who feel that why should the world pay heed to Guyana, I ask you, why do you need the world to come drill your oil? Why you don't do it yourself? Or why do you need the world to buy your bauxite or to buy your sugar, to buy your rice? We need the world. We cannot exist alone. Every country has problems, but it's up to us to ensure we have a country that we can hand to our children. So let me turn to Mr. Ruel Johnson. Ruel, I must say on behalf of Room 592 and our viewers and listeners, congratulations on becoming one of the editors of KAIETEUR News. Congratulations, and I mean that in every way. I think, it's going to be one of the things we are looking forward to see Mr. Ruel Johnson in action, sir. So welcome to Room 592, Ruel.
Thank you. Well, I've been here for the past month or so. So, in a sense, I've been in action virtually
Good.
every day for about 4 weeks.
And is it because you're in action we are seeing more of Leonard? Because, it seems like you've kicked Leonard out.
No. What I could tell you is that the staff has signed a petition for him to do some kind of thing with his beard and his hair.
Okay.
Well, this is the man that very deliberately asked me to come on initially.
Okay.
I don't know why he would say that.
So he could get more time to do radio.
Good.
So he set up himself.
Well, great. Well, let's get right into it. Ruel, you have, we have asked you to be here specifically for, as a citizen of Guyana, you have every right to be expressive of your own opinion. And this is not as an editor of KAIETEUR News, but as Ruel Johnson.
Yeah.
You have been in 2013, 2014, leading up to the 2015 elections, you have worn many hats. And we're going to describe some of those hats in a moment. Yeah. But you have obviously been outspoken against the corruption of the former government. Then you became an employee of the current government. And of course, at some stage, you became outspoken against what you saw as things that you may not agree with.
Yeah.
Ruel, I have been saying over the past week that a lot of persons in the current government have lost their moral compass. What's your comment, sir?
Well, just a slight correction. I have never been outspoken. The issue is, I think that, and the wonderful thing about social media and Facebook in particular is that it shows you what you might have said 3, 4, or 5 years ago. And my position has always been consistent. If it is that governments, however well-meaning, decide to exist in an echo chamber, and they don't listen to people, they inevitably, whatever their original intentions are, they always accomplish or go down the path of corruption and as you said, lose their moral compass. And that is precisely what I think happened over the past 5 years. You had an historic political administration, one that helped, because of its configuration, to change the narrative when it comes to the ethnic voting patterns. And then it lost all of that moral and political currency in a very short time.
And Ruel, if I may, what would you say, given your insight, what would you say might have been some of the pointers that we can take as lessons? At what point did those political and moral currency became fragmented and virtually eventually lost?
The fissures were there very early on. I shared on my social media page, on Facebook page, a comment I made in June of 2015, which is less than a month of the change of administration, in which I spoke to a dangerous trend of an echo chamber developing. And that devolved, as it were, into not just an echo chamber, but an echo chamber atop what you call an ivory tower. And so you had degrees of disconnection from the people. The problem with governments, unless it is that there are proper pathways for citizen participation and citizen feedback, what you have is people who believe that they are the smartest people in the room, in a room that is necessarily very closed. And so it was very early on.
Correct.
Yeah.
Now, I want to talk a little bit. I want to take a couple steps back. I mentioned a couple of the hats you might have worn. Some you might have not have known that you were wearing because they were thrown at you. Whether you earn them or not will be your own choice. Who the cap fit, But you were seen to be a cyber bully. You were seen to be, somebody who just hated the PPP for what it were. And I say this to you because I had pretty much the same attack. I was seen to be somebody who just hated the PPP for petty or personal or whatever reasons. However, you mentioned something important there just now when you said that the racial landscape is the one that everybody seems to lose focus of. And so, Mr. Cyberbully, this racial landscape, isn't it true that there was a change in 2015 in the racial voting?
Oh yeah, there was definitely a change in racial the ethnic voting patterns. It had to be, it had to have been, or ethnic. If there were any adjustment in our ethnic composition, it would have been an adjustment in which for the major ethnic groups, Indian and African or Guyanese, there would have been a reduction with some amount of parity. So there had to be crossover voting in order for 2015 to happen. Now, let me address the cyberbullying issue.
Yes, please.
I used social media very deliberately as a means of interrogating and very frankly attacking the government of the day in a society in which media for the ordinary man was expensive and off limits. And this is something that's been happening globally. And it's good. I mean, that badge is something that I would wear proudly, because if it is that a single person can be seen to be bullying a government, then it shows that the power that social media has in flipping the script in which the average citizen can interrogate a hostile administration, political administration. Yeah.
But you would also know that many other persons would have many other persons would have joined and been part of that struggle one way or another.
Oh, definitely.
But I wanna also draw your mind to another factor of your and I'm looking at these 7 years, 2 years prior to the APNU AFC coming into power, and their 5 years. These 7 years as formative years for what could have been a very progressive Guyana. That of course we lost. It's important, Ruel, I believe, that we assess these years of who contributed, how we contributed, and where we lost it all. What happened to the mosquito men?
Is this something that I don't know about here? What is mosquito men here, man?
You will now know.
Okay, bring it on, my friend. What is mosquito? Let's hear it.
Allegedly. How do I answer this?
The rains came and they all mosquitoes don't live for too long, right?
Yog, you have this man fumbling. Something is wrong here. I need to hear it.
I have to find a way to answer this creatively and smartly. What happened to the mosquito men, as it were, is that, and it's something that happened to. Let me put it this way: you said that other people joined in with regard to the cyber thing, the cyber activism, etc. There was a group of us, for example, who formed what we call the War Room. So it was less disorganized than it actually seemed, and so there was coordination on several fronts. Post 2015, the War Room disintegrated, and now, if you were to check where the different members are, some have stayed the course, as it were. Some have
But
chosen one political side.
Most of them would have adopted a comfortable armchair, political armchair, right?
Some, yeah, some. Some would have, some not so much. And essentially, that is the same parallel thing that happened to the mosquitoes, as it were.
Okay.
So let me see if I get it straight there.
Yes.
So the Mosquito was a group of cyber bullies or whatever it is that formed prior to 2015 so they could go after the government of the day. But let me say this, Yog, because this seems to be an issue that is coming up more and more and more. The debate as to the role of the media and whether you are fake news or whatever it is. And this thing has been burning me. I don't know. I've been saying it that the media does not have a constituency, should not have a constituency, and therefore they are doing whatever it is that they're doing when it comes to the mandate.
Yeah.
That being the case, you, Yog, would have raised the issue, which is very, very true. The government of the day is always going to be the one that is the biggest target for the media because they're the ones that's handling the purse strings. They're the ones who's going to be handling social projects and so many other things. Big projects, so it is always going to be, they're going to be in the news. It's going to be negative, it's going to be positive. Do we join with the public departments that deal with state media and endorsing them? Are you doing the mandate? And we're seeing more and more private media especially is coming under attack for taking the government of the day into play. And I could tell you this, even today, Yog, that debate came up because I could remember leading up to 2015, I make no bones about this, we investigated the PPP. We were in many areas, the by-channeling, we could say it, the by-channeling, the Barbies Bridge, Marriott Hotel, the house lots along these banks, so many things that you could go into, NISL deals.
Spectrum giveaway.
Spectrum giveaway. We were, the Glen Lal, I think even Ruel probably would have been standing on the streets when we were going after those broadcast license and saying why didn't Stabrook News get, why didn't KAIETEUR News get, and so on. Now, fast forward 2020, are we fake news? Are we doing our job? Do we have a constituency? So this is pretty interesting that we actually had a group leading up to 2015, maybe disbanded now, of people who were actually advocating on social media for Better Guyana. Some things were left unsaid for a very long time. Some disclosures here now.
Yeah.
Yes. So, Ruel, the media obviously, and I'm really happy you joined the media, the mainframe media, so to speak, because I think that the media has to continue to be as vigilant as it can ever be. Because here's one of the arguments we have, Leonard and Ruel.
Yeah.
The government is paid by the taxpayers. It's our monies that funnel and funded the government. This current lot that is absolutely lazy and doing nothing for people, we are still paying them to do nothing. Similarly, Leonard, the people are paying you directly by buying your newspapers, and they deserve in exchange for that the best service that you could give them. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, easily. What I've noticed, and it happened under the previous administration, is that at a time of great crisis and division, what you have is people having this sort of, people who are invested, who've been misled by the political leadership, making calls like, oh, we should boycott this media and boycott that media. It's been leveled at KAIETEUR News. Now it's a coalition. I've seen some coalition followers say that you should boycott KAIETEUR News, etc. KAIETEUR is the only paper that has columns, weekly columns, for both APNU as a separate entity AFC is a separate entity. It also has columns. And this is something that I have a personal experience with. Technically been experienced with. It has columns being written by Dr. David Hines and Mr. Lincoln Lewis. How it is that Lewis and Hines had ended up at KAIETEUR News is that, and this happened while I was on the board of the state paper Chronicle, the government didn't want them there. In fact, when the government decided, there was a vote on the board to remove them, I resigned, and 3 other board members resigned on principle from the board of the Chronicle, GNNL. And they came here and they found a home in KAIETEUR News. Now, in KAIETEUR News, they are some of the biggest defenders of government. If there were a boycott of KAIETEUR News, it would be a boycott of government content.
Correct.
The most concentrated government content in a newspaper, or pro-government content in a newspaper, and in a credible newspaper. So one of the things that we've had to deal with, and Leonard was right, earlier in the day we had a discussion on it. The media, credible media, has one goal, which is to present the truth and package it for people, for the citizens. The citizens respond by investing the trust and the money in the media. I think KAIETEUR News and increasingly now KAIETEUR Radio has I think rewarded that trust. With regard to the state media, now it's always a touchy thing for me. I personally believe that the state media has a role to play. I think there should be state media on the perhaps idealistic premise that the state has a particular responsibility to the citizens that a private entity does not have. The problem, of course, and this goes to our political configuration in the winner-take-all politics, is that the state media becomes consumed because of how powers are aligned in the executive, in protecting the executive when it should be protecting and representing the interests of the people who put the executive there in the first place. And that's the key problem. Everything that we have when it comes to, and we addressed earlier the issue of the fact that whenever government of the day is in power, the media focuses on them. That is because of how our constitution is. Overwhelming power exists in the executive. And that's where you naturally have to focus. So if we reduce that power, I think the state media will function better. And of course, the attention that the private, independent, credible media pays will be more diffuse. We can't invent news to fit some sort of skewed sense of what balance should be. If people are screwing up, we focus on the people who are screwing up.
Correct. But Ruel, there is another economic / moral ground that one has to look at. Look, the taxpayers of this country has no choice. They have to accept whatever the Chronicle and the Department of Political Information is spewing out to them on a day-by-day basis.
I was going to correct you. He said public information, but you're right, essentially right.
What did he say?
Yeah.
He said Department of Political Information.
He said yesterday, he said propaganda.
Yeah, that's purposeful. That's
Yeah.
purposeful. Yeah, but you see, the viewers and listeners have a choice with private media.
Of course.
They can refuse to buy your newspaper. They can not tune into this channel. But the same doesn't go with regard. And here is where I have a problem. The current media, the government-owned media, is spending 99.9% of its time and space, including the Department of Political Information. They're spending 99.9% of the taxpayers' money to spew nonsense in a time when the students of this country needs exam material. The students of this country needs direction. The students, and one could argue, but Ruel, the problem I have, I would disagree with you, and of course we'll take the argument another day maybe, that state media has a place. I believe that there's a budding democracy The media, the government, if it wants to create a news feed, it can do its news feed. But the kind of nonsense we are paying billions of dollars to needs to probably become very much more accountable. And if they can be accountable, they need to stop it. Ruel, I have a question for you on independent media. Should independent media have, and this is a ticklish question, I don't know how you're answering it. Should independent media have anonymous writers? What are your thoughts about anonymous fictitious names on social media and anonymous names in the newspaper?
That is very easy. I can tell you this. I've been in the newspaper or the media business for longer than people know. I've been in it for 17 years, on and off.
Anonymous, yeah.
in various avatars. My first newspaper work, I was in my early 20s, and I wrote a column that was published in Chronicle called Bird's Eye View, and written by purportedly somebody called Avis Bird. Now, the editor at the time, Sheriff Khan, knew who I was. The Sunday editor knew who I was. And the topics were, public information, society, culture, etc., literature. I even published one of my short stories preemptively there. When I couldn't provide a column in time. I think that anonymity, handled properly and professionally in a credible context, has a role in media. And this is as true of KAIETEUR News as is of the New York Times, for example, which I think last year published one or more devastating critiques of the Trump administration. Anonymity, however, and this is where the credibility of the publisher and the journalists, the editors, come into play, should not be a shield for wanton attack and libel on people. It should not be a shield for pushing an agenda. I believe that if you believe something strongly enough, and you want to sustain it, you put your face to it.
And I agree with that, Ruel. You see, one of the things when you're talking there, like you have one or two of the columns, like Peep and Tom, Them Boys. I think the Baku used to be there.
Yeah.
And these are good. That you can't put your names in it if you're writing it. So it's there, satire and things.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me put a disclaimer here from Yog Mahadeo. These are two editors of KAIETEUR News defending KAIETEUR News position that has nothing to do with Room 592 and Yog Mahadeo. I believe that everybody who writes needs to put their name and their face out there, but we'll leave that discussion for another day.
You tell that to the boys that writes Them Boys, sir. I don't know.
Yeah, but Yogi, remember, it's sort of a crazy thing, right? I mean, you could openly ask me, for example, about and Leonard, I should do a specific reference when you asked about what happened to the mosquitoes. Is that there was the website GT Mosquito. And they had several mosquitoes. The reason he could ask me is that allegedly I was involved. So it was a mixture of an anonymous and not anonymous. I think the content is really what matters. And it couldn't be a case where the site could have been seen as an illegitimate news entity. A lot of these stories that broke leading up to the elections and that were picked up by more mainstream media originally came from that site.
Great. But you see that argument can go the other way too, that people will eventually or could potentially end up, destroying those things, abusing those private spaces and those anonymous spaces to make trouble as well. And then, the battle would be lost. Ruel, I just want us, viewers and listeners, let us just take a pause because we want to welcome Mr. Vincent Alexander to Room 592. We'll get back to Ruel and elections 2020. We would like to welcome Mr. Vincent Alexander to Room 592 to give us an update as to what is happening in these elections 2020. Sir, can you hear us, Mr. Alexander?
Yes, loud and clear.
Wonderful. Well, welcome
I'm hearing
once
you
again.
loud and clear.
Wonderful. Welcome once again to Room 592, Mr. Alexander. Viewers and listeners, this is GECOM Commissioner, Mr. Vincent Alexander. Sir, could you kindly take your time, tell us where are we with these elections recount, and specifically what would the Guyanese people look forward to for the next 5 to 7 days, sir?
Well, where we are at now, we have finished counting 9 of 10 regions. The count is purely now on Region 4, or what we call in electoral terms, District 4. We were able to complete today 83 boxes, the majority of which were boxes for Region 4. I anticipate that we are working towards a completion of the count per se, not later than, but it could be earlier than the 8th. Once that count is finished, we are looking to the receipt of a report from the Chief Elections Officer, which is comprised of 2 parts: the tabulations and the summary of the observation reports. The GECOM will then deliberate on that, and based on that deliberation, will instruct the Chief Elections Officer to prepare his final report. Once that final report is prepared, we have no more than 3 days to come to the nation and to give our pronouncement.
Great. Well, that looks simple enough, as it did on March 2nd as well. And thank you for that report, sir. Some questions, if you don't mind, Mr. Alexander. With regards to the point you made here about the report. So the CEO will prepare a report that reflects the tabulations and that summarizes the observations. Yes. Do you envisage, does Mr. Vincent Alexander envisage an investigation into those observations from GECOM?
The observations have different aspects to them. There are some of them which are evidence of administrative problems on the face. Mm-hmm. There are some of them which are evidence of what may be considered electoral malfeasance. Insofar as the electoral malfeasance are concerned, in the main, I think they surround the possibility that people who are or were overseas were impersonated, and that people who died may have been voted for. Mm-hmm. Now, in relation to those 2 matters, the onus is on those who are making the allegation to submit evidence. If they do submit that evidence, when we consider the observation report, that evidence, I think, will be considered at the same time. The administrative matters, some of them, I think, will have to hold until the end of this process for determination.
Okay. And Mr. Alexander, do you see a potential that yourself and your fellow commissioners may be convinced that these elections were not credible?
Well, I don't want to make a call at this time. Mm-hmm. But I would certainly say that we have to look at the magnitude of the information submitted, and on that basis, make a determination as to whether we think elections were credible or not.
Uh-huh. And I think, if I may, I think that basis will be more dependent on the magnitude of the problems with regards to the dead and migrant persons being impersonated.
I would say yes.
Okay.
Okay. Yes.
A question for the Commissioner. Good evening, Mr. Commissioner. How are you doing?
Good evening.
I want to ask you, in some quarters, people are thinking that maybe the observations, that GECOM is not supposed to be looking into that. Is it the take of GECOM at this point in time, the commission proper, that it has to take that into consideration?
Well, I don't know that we would have provided for observations in the process without a purpose. So the fact that the order for this recount, so-called, provided for observations means that we did in fact have some purpose in mind. And the order, it also specifies that we are addressing the question of the credibility of the count, of the recount. So
Right.
yes, they're integral to the process.
Correct. So Mr. Alexander, the other question I have for you is, if let us say you and your fellow commissioners, all six of you, have which is hardly likely, but would agree that there are some serious problems with what has been pointed out in the observation report. I think the nation is looking at the six of you as, three on one side, three on the other. The six of you will never agree. And so ultimately, Madam Chairman would have to make a decision. Sir, my question to you, given also your legal knowledge and your years of experience, is the chairman obliged? Is the commission obliged to make a declaration at the end of this process?
I would say we are largely in uncharted waters. I see where we are in some regards in terms of history of electoral practices in Ghana. We are in uncharted waters. And so, in some regards, this is a matter which people will still be addressing their mind to. What are our options? What are our options in such a circumstance? So even me, I would not be finite at this time about that matter. We are in uncharted waters, but we are faced with the issue of if not credible, then what?
Okay, because the constant thinking that seems to be emerging is that one of the political parties, one of the main political parties in the process, has had emerging noise being made about too many problems in these elections and it cannot be credible. And the other party opposing to that party would be saying, well, whatever problems there are, it's above and beyond because GECOM cannot and should not investigate itself. What is Commissioner Alexander's take on that, sir?
Well, I don't know that what GECOM is doing is an investigation of itself. Let's ask the question differently. In the normal course of an election, GECOM can be appealed to for a recount. Is that a recount an investigation of itself? The law provides for that.
Yes.
Of course, this goes beyond that normal recount, but the fact of the matter, I'm saying that there is precedent of GECOM by law reviewing declarations made by GECOM. So I don't quite agree that it is a question of GECOM passing judgment on itself in contradiction to legal provisions, because the law as it is does provide for GECOM to review its own declarations. Of course, the level at which that occurs is different.
Correct.
Because even in this instance, this recount is not being done at the level at which the original count was done. This recount is being done at the level of the commissions, the commission supervised recount. Recounts are normally done. The count is normally done in the first instance at the lowest level, at the level of the polling station. Declarations are normally done at the level of the districts. And a final declaration is done at the level of the commission. We have not gotten to the point where the commission has entered into that process of making any determination. Okay. We're at the point where determinations were made at the lower level, and the commission now, which sits above. So in a sense, the commission is not reviewing itself in that regard, because the organization has tiers. And so it is the highest tier now reviewing what was done at a lower tier.
But to get to the the allegations of impropriety, to get to the allegations of people impersonating others, wouldn't that be outside of the scope of the investigation that GECOM could do within itself? The reason for asking this, sir, if you look back within the last 94 days, you would find in the first instance, when there was a problem with the declaration, the commission did not step forward. In fact, appellants went and had the court step into the process to say, listen, we need a proper, or we need you guys, we need Mr. Mingo to comply with 84.2. Another instance occurred when the stakeholders in the process agreed to have a recount. The courts again step in and say, hold, wait, let us examine whether recount is acceptable under the law or not. So in both instances, it went outside of the commission to the courts of Guyana to make a determination. Why would this particular instance now be left to the commission?
Well, two things. The court itself made it clear that they couldn't supervise how GECOM did its work.
Mm-hmm.
What they merely had to do in the circumstance in which they intervened was to say to GECOM, do your work as prescribed by law. Mm-hmm. But we will not supervise, and we will not tell you how to do your job, but do your job as prescribed by law. So that's what the court, in a sense, said. Where we're at, we are at a point of a recount. Once GECOM is doing that within the ambits of the law, given the previous decisions of the court, then the court is not likely to step in once there's no basis on which you can say GECOM is not doing what is authorized. GECOM, by virtue of Article 162 of the Constitution and Section 22 of the Election Amendments Act, has prescribed what it wishes to do in the circumstance, and is doing just that.
Okay. I want to just take you back to the parties, the stakeholders in this process, sir. Does Commissioner Alexander feel that whatever the declaration that is being made, that the parties will have to accept, and thereafter all the possibilities are within law as to what they could do? Do you feel that the stakeholders are going to accept the decision that the commission will emerge with?
To be very frank, the way in which the stakeholders are lining up, I rather suspect that one way or the other, one or the other stakeholder may seek to have the court intervene in the matter.
And this is intervene before or after the potential swearing in your view, sir?
Well, I didn't refer to swearing in.
Oh, yeah. Well, intervene means yes, intervene.
I didn't refer to swearing in.
Correct.
I referred to GECOM's pronouncement.
Correct, declaration. Okay. So
as a consequence of the report.
I don't know if you would have been made aware of this, sir, but I believe one of the parties, one of the stakeholders would have approached the courts within the last week to already intervene in the process. Are you aware of any such moves?
I have heard rumors, but I'm not aware of the actual act. Mm-hmm. I've heard talk about that, but I'm not aware of the actual act.
Okay.
So, for example, I don't think GECOM has been served with any documents from the court, not to my knowledge.
And a quick question here, Commissioner, a cursory look. Does Vincent Alexander believe that there's enough at this point in time in terms of observation and other claims for the elections, for a move for the elections to be declared null and void?
Two things I want to say about that. One, I have not been exposed to sufficient information to make a judgment because we have not yet, as commissioners, been exposed to the observation report. So in some regards, it's early days for me to make that comment. Secondly, depending on what point we're at, I have difficulties with the terminology Northern Border. You can only annul something which has been declared. And so I have difficulties with those terminologies, Northern Border.
Take that, Leonard. Roel, we have Mr. Roel Johnson in studio too, sir. So if you don't mind, Roel.
Yeah, I know Vincent well. Just a clarification, Vincent. The 207 names, and we're getting mixed information about this. 207 names that were submitted to the chair and that were forwarded to the police, of which 172 were returned. Did the commission receive evidence that these people voted? Either all of them or any particular ones?
My understanding of what has occurred is as follows. That in the work of the workstation, a particular political party sought to get clarification in the workstation about serial numbers for which their corresponding votes cast. So that they went away from that process with serial numbers, indicating that the names associated with these serial numbers, votes were cast for them. No, they didn't come away with names. They came away with serial numbers. But the extent to which they have at their disposal the OLE is the extent to which they can then determine the names. And through that process of determination, they then, I think, made those submissions of the persons who, according to them, are alleged to have been out of the country but to have been voted for. So it's those names that were sent, as I understand it, to immigrations.
Yeah.
And immigration then have responded to him. Of these names that you have sent to us, these are the ones that all records show were out of the country at the time.
Let me just read from one of the letters that were sent to the chair by Mr. Harmon, APNU AFC election agent, signed. And this is the critical part. I hereby supply a forwarded list of electors listed in the appendix to this letter who were not in Guyana as at the 2nd of March and were recorded as voted. So this is a fairly definitive statement. And attached to that is we have a list of 310 names, polling divisions, polling stations, ballot box, serial numbers, as far as the people's date of birth. So this is fairly definitive information. As our reporting has shown,
the list to which you have just referred, GECOM has not said anything, nor to my knowledge, has not received any information on that list to date.
No, but this list, the language in the letter I just read is identical to the language in the first letter, which has 207 names, which were forwarded to the commissioner, of which 172 were returned as confirmed as not being in the country. Our reporting has shown, as of I think today's report, that 14 of those people, of that original 172, were in fact in the country.
14 of the 172.
Of the 172.
So two things have happened here. You are therefore suggesting that you have accessed the 172.
Yeah, we have a copy of the 172 that was returned.
You access the 172.
We have the list.
And that 14 of the 172 are in the country.
And were in the country as of election day.
They were in the country. My response will be this. The chief immigration officer is the legitimate source of that information.
Uh-huh.
And anyone who disagrees with that information, the onus is on that person to show that the chief immigration officer has presented incorrect information.
Oh, we have. We've posted, and we've personally checked people's passport pages, issued.
Has that information been sent to GECOM?
No, we've published it. I mean, I'm not sure that we have a role.
To me, publishing is not a source. GECOM cannot go to the newspapers and make a determination based on that. If we were to do that, then we would determine who is dead by the announcements.
But Mr. Alexander, let us just take a step back. If KAIETEUR News had not done that, would GECOM then had taken the commissioner's report as sacrosanct?
GECOM will take what the chief immigration officer sends to us as official and correct information, unless otherwise determined.
Okay, and one last question to you on that, in that stead. If you would have sought, if GECOM would have sought evidence from the immigration officer, wouldn't that evidence therefore, like if you were to ask for evidence, you're taking on a shape of a court, wouldn't that evidence therefore have to be examined and cross-examined for veracity and for everything else that you would have when dealing with evidences?
Chief immigration officer is the official source of that information. And I want to make a correction here because I've seen misreported on this one. Under Regulation 40 of the National Registration Act, which the report that sought to speak to the matter said only has 27 sections, and therefore was questioning how we could refer to a 40. The 40 is not a part of the Act per se, it's the 40th regulation. Has the authority to acquire that information routinely and is authorized routinely to act on that information. It is similar to GECOM routinely receiving information on the dead and acting on that information because it is coming from an official source which the law authorizes GECOM to accesses from and to use in its processes.
But if I may, but even though you take that information from those sources, you still have, in normal course of an elections, you still have a claims and objection period that allows the vetting of that information regardless of where it comes from.
The claim of objection does not provide for what you have just referred to in that. What the claims and objection provides for is if someone's name is not on the list. It's not to question why you're not on the list. It is to say I'm presenting myself to be on the list. It doesn't provide to question why the person was taken off of the list. It provides for the person to turn up and to say, I've checked the list, my name is not there, I'm presenting myself.
Okay. The other thing, sir, is coming back to because as you know, this forms the conversation across the country. So thanks for these clarifications. But coming back to the basis upon which GECOM went to seek evidence, weren't those just allegations? I mean, the chairman said the chairman basically said, if APNU or PPP makes an allegation, you must prove it. However, the chairman took unfounded allegations and went to seek evidence on her own. The commission went beyond.
I think you're adjectively wrong.
Okay.
To say the chairman take unfounded allegations is to conclude about those allegations. The chairman took allegations to determine if they're founded.
But the chairman
the
said
chairman
that
didn't take unfounded allegations.
yeah, but the chairman said that you who bring the allegation has to prove it. But now you have taken a different.
The chairman said that you who bring the allegation, you might remember in the workstation, what they merely did was to say, we have information that this person is out of the country. That's what they said. They then sent information, in which information they sought to specify what is it they were saying about the persons in question. What the chairman has essentially done is to verify if what they said is in fact true.
So the chairman has basically sought the evidence based on the complaints from one of the stakeholders.
The chairman has sought to verify the evidence presented. Is the evidence admissible or not? So using some terms. It's admissible because it has been verified to be true.
But that's the next question I had for you. Isn't that in the first place admissible evidence now non-admissible because the public space has proven that a particular percentage of that so-called verified thing coming from the immigration department is now not correct?
That will become a matter of contention, not because of what the public space has said. The public space can say what it feels like saying. But that will become a matter of contention. If the persons affected say it's the GECOM, not the public space. The public space, anything can happen in the public space. If one bothers with the public space, I shouldn't be talking to you, I should be dead.
But Mr. Alexander, you didn't ask those persons to verify whether they're here or not. So how can they now come to you and say I'm here? If KAIETEUR News hadn't done that, people wouldn't have known that they're reported to you as not being in the country.
GECOM has processing. GECOM has commission. And undoubtedly, when the information is brought to the commissioner, processes in that regard would unfold. We have commissioners who in the past, during all of these processes, would say, give us the names so we can make a determination, we can do a field check and all of that. So that information on the face of it at this point in time is acceptable.
Yeah,
the commission has not yet deliberated, and it's a commission in which there is the scope for commissioners to say, stop, let's go and check this, probably from another angle, before we go further. And this is not unprecedented. It's happened every time we have done these recently verifications in the field. Commissioners asks, give us a list. We'll come back and say whether we agree based on our own field determination. So that, people have said in the past that the system has worked. I would say this way, this time, the system is not being worked out. So there's still scope for the system to work.
Okay.
All right.
Ruel, 1 second. Okay. My last question to you, and then, I know that we promised you 30 minutes. I'm sorry. My last question to you, Commissioner, is as follows. Shouldn't GECOM then, now that they are aware that, that there is a problem with that 172 names,
there's an alleged problem.
Okay. Shouldn't GECOM or would Commissioner Vincent Alexander, as one of the commission, would you move that GECOM thoroughly investigate that the entire list rather than rely on its singular source?
The singular source is the authentic source. If some interested party, and a matter like this is a matter that allows even third parties, because it has possible impact on an election, which is everybody's interest. Therefore, third parties, other than the original persons who are affected, are authorized in this circumstance to come to GECOM saying we have a problem with what GECOM has said, and therefore we're asking GECOM to look into the matter. I'm quite sure that GECOM will be obligated to do so. But GECOM will not be obligated to do so because a newspaper has published. GECOM will be getting itself into all sorts of issues if GECOM including the fact that one of the names in the newspaper apparently published, somebody has written to say, hey, take me out of that. I was overseas.
Oh.
Somebody has written to GECOM saying that. I was overseas.
Let me just respond to the and for clarification. I see people are saying that KAIETEUR News messed up on that occasion.
Did what?
They say that KAIETEUR News messed up on the that's completely untrue. KAIETEUR News.
You notice I haven't said anything about KAIETEUR.
Oh yeah, but
I have responded to what you said about information in the public domain.
Yeah, well,
I haven't.
Well,
and I've said that what information is in the public domain, wherever it is, and you have said it's there.
Yeah.
One of those persons has said that leave me out of this.
Oh yeah, easily. But that person is not responding to any media reporting that they were out of the country. What the person is responding to is a guy called Adler Bino. He's responding to the appearance of his name on the list of the 172 people that we just published. And that list didn't come from KAIETEUR News. It came originally from the coalition, and then from the...
The coalition doesn't have the 172.
No, they
I don't know.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying...
What I know, GECOM got the 172.
No, the 172 came from a list provided to GECOM, the GECOM chair, from a list
and not all of the 172.
Oh no, yeah, no,
officers out of the country.
What am I explaining? The 172 came from the list of 207, provided by the coalition to GECOM. GECOM then forwarded that list to the chief immigration officer, who then confirmed that of that 207, 172 were confirmed as being out of the country. The person who said that they were out of the country, there was no reporting to say that they were in the country. They weren't part of the subset of people that any reporting said. So
why is it that he would write the letter which he wrote that suggested that it had been reported, and that he is objecting to that?
Because the letter he wrote said that he saw his name on the list of people who were said to be out of the country but recorded as have voted. That allegation was made by the coalition.
Where he saw this list?
He saw the list as part of the general list provided originally from the coalition and then extracted by the chief immigration officer. So there was no allegation that he was in the country by any reporting.
I'm just trying to understand how he arrived at the need to write a letter.
Oh, that's for him. We have no idea. The original reporting by KAIETEUR News cited 3 people. 2 of them we named. One who we verified, but who wished to remain anonymous. He was not one of those people. So his issue really has to do with the coalition saying that he was represented as voted. And I think he was concerned that somebody voted on his behalf when he was out of the country, as alleged, but not proven by the coalition by virtue of the original list. Now, with regard to
why not proven if the source of their list would be what came out of the stations using the serial numbers?
No. This is what we published was a document given or purportedly given to the chair, and then we published another document that was purportedly returned to the chair
But the document given to the chair,
Uh-huh.
the source,
The
the
source
source
wasn't
as I understand it, would have been
the chief immigration.
the listing of persons
Mhm.
by serial number
No, it
who
was
in the workstation it
no,
was
no, no.
they were said to have voted.
No, that's incorrect. The what was given was a very detailed document that again featured as much as the person's date of birth, polling division, polling number, and serial
Yeah,
number.
yeah, yeah. But what's the origin?
Yeah.
What's the origin? The origin of that would have been that serial number. You see, because once you get the serial number, then you can go to the OLE, which is a public
Of
document.
course, yeah, yeah. Well, I'm
Have the
saying,
other
yeah,
information that you're referring to.
yeah. But what I'm saying, the source of the information wasn't immediately. The source of information was originally first the coalition, then extracted from that list the chief immigration officer or deputy chief
Hmm.
immigration officer.
So I'm leaving this program with a question
Yeah.
as to where did Adler Bino get his intimation that caused him to write the letter?
The
Right.
list produced
I
by
got you.
the list produced by the chief immigration officer in response to the original list, which we had as a source document and we published in general, but there was no claim.
All right, so you got it in the newspaper. You got it in the newspapers.
Yes, but from a source document that the purported
I'm not
they have not denied.
disagreeing.
In fact, they've confirmed that it's their document.
Let's yeah, but Mr. Alexander, it is a fact that the police commissioner responded accepting that those people may be in the country, but they may be so illegally. In other words, he is basically taking a step back. So maybe
He's
I mean
not
I
taking a
as
step back. He's giving clarification. He
uh-huh.
said that, look, my information is the official information of people who have left this country. If somebody left the country illegally, or returned illegally, he would not have that information.
Well, in some cases, these people never traveled.
Well,
In our reporting, they never even traveled.
So
I am
Mr.
not
Alexander, what should be the next step?
those people, or any interested party, because elections is everybody's interest, should come forward to GECOM and say, we are submitting information that contradicts what has been presented to you, and therefore we're asking you to make a final determination.
Well, in that case, who would the burden of proof fall on? The immigration authority.
They're claiming, no.
Uh-huh.
Hear what is happening here. The immigration authority has a legal function.
Mhm.
They're claiming they've carried out their legal function. If someone is claiming that in carrying out their legal function they've erred,
Yeah.
that person has the burden of proof.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Mr. Alexander, I know you have to go, sir. Thank you. I do certainly look forward for a continuation of this chat sometime next week, if you don't mind. I know you're busy. My final thing to you is that, if you can, as we have said to Mr. Says Gunraj, too, on behalf of the Guyanese public, the Secretariat is working very hard at this time. One cannot imagine what people are going through to keep a mask on all day and all night to keep that recount going. We certainly look forward to the next 4 to 5 days with great interest as we look to an end of this. And I'm looking forward to your return maybe next week, Monday or Tuesday. Give me your timing, sir.
I will avail myself once it's convenient.
Good.
I don't shy away from facing the protest state, and I try when I face the protest state to be factual and accurate.
And he is true, Yogi is true. He doesn't shy away.
Oh, it's true. Thank you, Commissioner Alexander. Thank you, and have a great night, sir.
Thank you very much.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we want to move on with our discussion for tonight. We have Mr. Ruel Johnson in the seat, and there we had a good discussion, Mr. Vincent Alexander. For those of you who thought, that the questions seem to have been one way or the other, many times these discussions, you have to be very careful as to read exactly and listen exactly as to what is being said, because people will say things in a certain way. And it matters to this country. And yes, Mr. Alexander is a commissioner of GECOM, and he represents a constituency, and his views and the way he's going to shape his decision is very important to us, because we use that to gauge how the next couple of days are going to be shaped within GECOM. So we thank the commissioner once again. As we say, he needs a good night rest because it continues tomorrow. We have also invited Mr. Seth Gunraj to come. And sir, have a good night. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we continue our discussion, I want to get back to Mr. Ruel Johnson. Ruel, you would have seen what's happening in these elections. What is your take, Ruel, as to the declaration? Are you able to say, given the SOPs, given the counts that's done so far, are you able to say, in your educated view, to make a call on these elections? By now, CNN would have made a call. You know that.
Yeah. We can't. I'm constantly checking up on the latest results. They're about I think 60. If we were to base it on the original declarations made, they're about roughly 70,000 votes or so still left to be counted. The total votes declared last time, which is about 460 something thousand, and so far we've counted about 397,000 votes.
Correct.
Right. And there's currently, I think, about a 6,000 vote disparity between the two major parties. I think the PPP is currently leading by about 6,000 votes.
Right. And presently the count is at the East Coast area, and there is a problem there. I mean, we can share this with people. So, for example, polling division 4123C, and none of the votes in that box could have been validated because of the absence of necessary documents. So whoever would have gotten votes in that division, nobody has gotten any votes. None of the sides. We don't know who would have gotten the votes, but not. So that seems to be a potential problem, Ruel.
Yeah, of course. What we've seen, and I should probably put a disclaimer that I wear several hats. One of which I've had to take off in a sense and put aside. I was a candidate in the last elections. I'm part of a party that contested, and it's part of the recount, which is why I've stayed away largely from the recount site itself. In terms of what we've seen, two sets of things. We've seen a clear and consistent attempt at manipulation of the elections, coming out of the difference between the SOPs that KAIETEUR News has independently verified, called Mingo Bingo, and then we've seen some substantial, I think, clerical errors that have been marketed conveniently as attempts at manipulation and rigging. Now, the errors as we've discovered them, that we just mentioned, in Sophia there was one box, for example, in which there were 80,000 ballots 80 ballots. Election coverage has you thinking in thousands all the time. But there were 80 ballots not stamped. I think 80 something. I think there were roughly 80. I think 80 something for the coalition and about 12 or so for the PPP. Those are by a clerical error.
Right.
80 people whose votes were disenfranchised. And
Correct.
The mantra of any democracy is that every vote must count. A vote is a sacred thing. Now, in another box, there were 106 ballots not stamped, all for the PPP, which means another 100 and something people who were disenfranchised. So, and
this is because of GECOM's staff.
There's training, it has to be a training issue. And of course, when you consider 2,300 polling stations, the room for human error is enormous. And so GECOM has to go back to the drawing board and tighten the chip. And there is no reason that it should. We had In the past several years, we had 5 years, we had 3 elections. But I think greater scrutiny now, because the stakes are so high in this one, that greater scrutiny on the processes has been placed.
Right.
The question,
so
however,
Ruel, here is where I'm getting at. So, on one hand, many of us, I think Shaz has done it well, and congrats to you, Shaz.
Yeah.
Shaz has looked at the numbers, Shaz has used the SOPs, and he has made a call. He has made a declaration
He has, yes.
who he feels will win based on the numbers. However,
yeah,
if these variables continue to hit, that there are there are divisions where the entire box wouldn't matter.
Yeah.
It is obviously going to bring down the net win by which any one party would win.
Yeah.
And East Coast, I think, and Ruel, I say this with no means of giving you a credit when I say so, but I do believe Mr. James Bond would have been reading some posts from the Mosquito Men of the past. Because his words are that, the devil's playground, the East Coast Demerara. I remember Mr. Ruel Johnson calling the entire Berbice, and this was not as a mosquito. I remember Ruel Johnson called the entire Berbice the name that I cannot and I do not usually use on this show here. But, I mean, I'm not blaming you. This goes with political experience and how you feel about the way people voted. But East Coast, Ruel, is where the critical votes for the PPP will matter now.
Of course, the issue is, and it's very simple. Is it a case being made to nullify an election based on votes lost to the opponent? If it is that I'm winning a game.
Yeah. I got you.
And
I agree.
Yeah.
Go on.
And your opponent is saying, I'm confident of winning anything. And your opponent is saying, all right, we lost some votes, but we will still accept this score. If you are winning, and if you've said you're winning, and this is just everything, why is it that you're saying that I win, but this thing is so bad that I don't accept this win for myself, and so the entire process has to be scrapped? So, you see, those logical things have to come into play in how we.
That's right.
How we process information being given to us by political players.
But one of the amazing things, Ruel, I need to throw this into our discussion here.
Yeah.
We are getting to program time just about. We need to discuss this. Look, the same. Let us just call the names. APNU AFC were quite happy on March the 13th thereabouts to accept a 15,000 inflation from Mingo that was there's no other word than to describe it other than fraudulent. And they were happy to accept those 15,000 inflated fraudulent figures of Mingo, but now they have a problem because the world is actually watching them, and they have led their supporters through the whole Kool-Aid parade.
The issue is very simple, and again, whether or not you have a partisan view of all this matters. If it is that one narrative has been put forward, sensible people, and this applied 5 years ago as well, sensible people have to ask themselves, if you are willing to accept this apple as perfect for consumption, because it's yours, you claim it's yours, if when you turn around the apple and you see it's labeled for somebody else, how is it within that time frame you are saying the apple is now spoiled and worm-ridden?
Correct. In fact, one of our callers called in today when Mr. Leonard Craig was on radio and said, if you had a stolen car then, and now somebody else get a stolen car, you can't cry. It was stolen in the first place. But I just want to reach out to one of our viewers, Leno, Miss Deborah Archer. Sorry, Miss Archer, those are not my words that I've quoted in terms of saying East Coast is the devil's playground. I'm aware East Coast has Buxton, BV, Paradise, Melanie, and all of those villages. I just quoted one of the politicians, so I just want to put that on record. Leonard, with your questions for Mr. Ruel Johnson, and go not because he's your colleague there, you know.
No, he knows that we still have a petition that's pending to do something about this here. But let's get straight on to it. I asked Mr. Vincent Alexander, and I'm going to ask you, Ruel. Do you believe that there's enough that warrants right now for an overturn of the elections that was held on March 2nd?
I can speak as somebody who is privy to a great deal of information. I don't believe so. I think a great deal of noise has been raised. I'm on social media a lot, and I usually encounter somebody who says, why is KAIETEUR News publishing so much information on Mingo's actions? And Mingo's actions, by the way, didn't materially change what was in the ballot box. It was a post facto attempt at rigging, and we can call it rigging, because it's a manipulation of numbers to favor some particular entity that did not reflect the reality of the numbers, and we've seen enough evidence of that to make a judgment call. What we have not seen, and every time that we try to pin somebody down to the provision of evidence of the anomalies, the numbers keep changing. We've gone from thousands of people overseas to countless numbers of dead voters, thousands of numbers of dead voters. We have not found evidence, and there's no prejudice in this. We have not found evidence, we've sought it, to say that somebody whose death certificate was provided was also ticked as voting. That is the standard. We have not seen that evidence on KAIETEUR News, yes, but we also have not seen it in Chronicle. We have not seen it in Capital News. We have not seen it on News Source. So when somebody challenges,
Let me just interject to say this.
Yeah.
Also, we have asked a question and have not gotten an answer.
Yeah.
That is, on March, whatever date it was, 8th and 13th or whatever it was, on those dates when Mingo made the declaration, there are some factors we need to take in consideration. Come to the recount here and you compare what happened then. Let me put it this way. Mingo did what he did.
yeah,
How would the public not be guaranteed or be guaranteed that there is not another Mingo managing the recount? So when APNU says ticked, when APNU asks, are these numbers ticked or unticked, that somebody is saying ticked or un, but nobody's verifying it. We have asked the local observers, are you verifying these calls that are made ticked or unticked? And they said no, they are not allowed to verify that.
that's very simple. It would have to be at such a tremendous scale as to have to implicate all of GECOM. Now, what we know for a fact is that in some instances, people who were said to have been ticked, we found out independently, that is not so. In addition to that, the people, many of the people who were said to have been ticked but were out of the country have shown, and we are publishing some more names tomorrow. Which brings us to another point I was making in terms of how we validate or invalidate elections or whatever. If it is that these countless claims, and the numbers keep shifting, and the contortions about the numbers keep shifting, we call it sophistry. But these countless claims, and we had a number that was as high as 200,000 impacted votes, which means nothing. It's gone down back to 90,000 impacted votes, which again means nothing. I have not seen 10 credible, which is 10. I haven't seen any, but let's put a number 10. I've seen serious clerical errors that call the capacity or the competence of GECOM staff into question.
Administration, right. Administration of these elections were improper.
Yes. But I haven't seen a single evidence, and this goes back to the vote. I haven't seen, there's two conditions. Somebody who's either dead or away, let's say somebody who's been departed, proven to be departed on March 2nd, who is also marked by evidence, corroborated evidence, as having voted on election day. There has been no evidence of that so far.
So, Ruel, my final question to you. We're running out of time. My final question to you. Who won these elections?
We don't know. I wouldn't make a pronouncement. The thing is, we have two things to go on. We have a declaration that we know and we can prove has been skewed substantially, grotesquely by Claremont Mingo.
Ruel, if this was 2015, Ruel of the Mosquito Group would have made a call, would have made a declaration.
Yes.
Why don't you ask me who won the election?
Leonard, I will not put you on that spot. You are my co-host. We have to be independent.
I would tell you who did not win. The people of Guyana did not win.
Correct. Anyway, we are up at program time. Ruel, 60 seconds. Your final thoughts, sir.
I think...
And you can still take back your words and say who you think won, given the numbers in front of you.
Yeah, I can say the PPP is in the lead currently.
Okay.
And we have 60,000 votes to play with. What I will also say is that we have to, and the media has to play a critical role in this. Mm-hmm. We have to get back to a place where credible information is established and credible sources of information established as a basis, as a foundation, and then from that, post-election, start the conversation that is necessary for healing, reconciliation, constitutional reform.
Right.
Not coming out of a process in which it is imposed and bullied, but that is based on the law, on the Constitution.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, Ruel, I'll tell you one of the reasons I asked you that question was not to put you on a spot, but more to say that, if the PPP wins these elections, given their past record, it needs any government, even if APNU wins, we need a proper opposition. A government alone can't run this country. A responsible and good opposition needs to put their hands up and say, we will do the will according to the will of the people, and that's why I ask you.
Very quick. Let me say this: we have seen in the past, and I say this at the risk of being some prejudice. We have seen in the past 3 months the narrative being taken over and being by a credible opposition that isn't reflected in numbers, but is reflected in action, which are the small parties.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Chaz, who's TCI, has been the most credible source for accurate information coming out of the recount. Not GECOM. Although his figures are based on GECOM.
Mm-hmm. So thank you so much. And ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Leonard Gildarie, thank you for being my gracious co-host tonight, sir. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for joining us. I'm going to let Mr. Leonard Gildarie have the final word as we say bye-bye to you from room 592 until tomorrow night. In fact, tomorrow at 1:30, when we will be opening the phones very early to you. Good night, everyone. Mr. Gildarie, over to you to say good night as we wrap up room 592 for tonight.
Room 592, and so it's going to be a very packed couple days. We know that it's crunch time now, so we're going to be with you on the dot at 1:30 tomorrow, and then at 7:30 tomorrow night. And so we are going to be with you and tell you who those guests are in the next couple of hours. In the meantime, have a pleasant rest of the evening, and thank you very much.
Bye-bye now. Have a good night, everyone.